There's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from working too hard. It comes from working on the wrong things. I mean, imagine you're a marathon runner, but instead of running your race, you're spending all your energy maintaining the track, organizing the water stations, managing the volunteers, and promoting the event. You're exhausted, but you haven't actually run a single mile. And that's what's happening to millions of Christians in ministry today. They are not tired from doing kingdom work. They are tired from running the church machine. They're not exhausted from making disciples all the time. They're exhausted from managing programs, budgets, fixing buildings, and monitoring committees. These servants of God are not burned out because they're encountering Jesus for too long and having too much time in worship, and it's just wearing them down. No, they're burned out from maintaining an institution that increasingly feels disconnected from God. And this is the slow erosion of energy, and it is one of the most dangerous crises facing the church today, because when I talk to people who work inside institutional Christianity, I am meeting tired people. They are running, they are overworked, and they're busy, but they're tired and they're getting depleted, eroded inside. You know, it's a serious situation, because when the people who are supposed to be leading us to come to Jesus are themselves running on empty, well, what's the hope for the rest of us? So today we're going to talk about what it's like to serve in ministry while feeling increasingly disconnected from it all. We're going to explore why so many faithful servants are burning out and what that means for the future of the church. Hi, I'm Chuck Quinley, and welcome to the Grounded Podcast, where we're building stable lives. Our lives are anchored in Jesus, even while the world is shaking. And this season is called Read Jesus Everything. We're trying to cut through 2,000 years of church tradition, theology, division of Christians, and rediscover the Jesus of the gospel so we can know him and join him on his mission to save the world. In our first episode, we talked about the quiet exodus, how 40 million in America alone have left the church. In the second episode, we talked about the heart of that exodus, how you could be drawn to Jesus but repelled by organized Christianity. And today, we're going to turn our attention to those who have not left. They are still showing up. They are still serving, still leading, but they are slowly dying inside. Now, maybe that's you. Maybe you are a pastor who started your ministry with fire in your heart, but now you're just trying to survive another Sunday. Or maybe you're a worship leader and you used to just feel caught up in God's presence, but now it just feels like a performance and you're really trying to get it right. Or maybe you're a volunteer and you used to love going and serving, but now it feels like an obligation. Well, if that's you, I want you to know you're not alone. And what you are experiencing is a symptom of a much larger problem within the system itself, not necessarily a problem with you. So let's talk about it. Running the machine we have inherited. I want you to imagine what has happened to me many times, and that's just imagine sitting down with a friend of yours. We're going to name him David, and David planted a church, and he has given 15 years of his life to that church. And he entered into this with a vision to create this, like everybody wants to try to do it perfectly. This is the place where you can encounter Jesus and grow as a disciple and serve in the world. And he's passionate, he's energetic, If you sit down with David recently, though, he looks exhausted. Not the kind of tired you get from a long week, the kind of tired that comes from years of carrying a weight you were never meant to carry. And he says to you, I didn't sign up for this. For what, you ask? For running a business, managing staff conflicts, fundraising, building maintenance, navigating denominational politics, keeping the board happy, competing with the megachurch down the street. He pauses and he says, I just wanted to make disciples, but I spend 90% of my time managing an experience business. But David's story is normal. Here's what happens. You start with a vision, you follow Jesus, you want to help others do the same. And over time, an institution takes over. Programs will only multiply. Budgets grow, staff expands, and then the building needs maintenance, and the committees need managing, and the donors need stewarding. And before you know it, you're not a pastor anymore. You're a CEO. And some guys love that idea, but it means you're not making disciples. You're managing a machine, and you're not doing pastoral care. You'll end up hiring another person to do the care. It's kind of a funny situation, huh? This machine, it's hungry. It demands more time, more energy, more resources. It never says, hey, that's enough. No, it always says more. So you give more. You work longer hours. You sacrifice your time. You neglect your own development. But you push through your exhaustion, and then slowly that fire that used to burn starts to dim. It's not just pastors experiencing this. It's everyone who's trying to faithfully serve in organized systems of the church around the world. Let me give you 5 symptoms of burnout. If you're serving in the ministry, whether as a pastor, staff member, or volunteer, you may recognize some of these symptoms. Number 1, you are emotionally exhausted. You used to feel energized by being in ministry, but now you may feel drained. And even thinking about Sunday morning can make you tired. You go through the motions, but your heart's not in it anymore, and you're running on fumes. Number 2, you are bone dry inside. You used to go to tears easily in worship and prayer. The Word of God used to be a companion in your life, but now it feels like all that is on back burner. You're teaching other people about Jesus, but you're not experiencing him much yourself. And you're giving, but you're giving out of an empty well. Number 3, you are cynical. You used to think you were going to change the world. Your church was so awesome. Now you're not so sure. And as you look around in the whatever group you're in, you've just seen, too much. You become jaded, skeptical, disillusioned. You don't really trust this system anymore. And it leads you to number 4, you're resentful. You used to serve with joy. Now it's an obligation, and you resent people who don't show up, they don't give, they don't volunteer, and you resent the demands this makes of your time, all the expectations placed on you and lack of appreciation. You're a little bit angry inside, and you don't know what to do with it. And that leads to number 5, my God, why have you forsaken me? You start questioning everything. You used to be so certain. You were certain about your calling. You're solid on your theology. You knew your purpose. And now you're not so sure about anything. Well, is this really what Jesus wanted? Is this really what the church is supposed to be? Am I even making a difference? Should I just quit? And a lot of people do it every week. Well, if you're experiencing any of these symptoms, here's the truth. You were not called by God to run a machine. You were meant to follow Jesus and help other people do the same. So how did we get here? How did ministry become so exhausting? Because Jesus didn't start an institution. He started a movement. He gathered a small group of people, made them his disciples, taught them how to live in the kingdom of God, and he sent them out to make more disciples. It was simple, it was organic, it was reproducible, but over time that movement became an institution. And institutions have a way of prioritizing their own advancement and survival even over the mission. It happens something like this. And this happens in all movements. Number 1, a movement grows. People join, communities within the movement form, more leaders emerge. That's all good. That's exactly what Jesus wanted. Then the movement gets unwieldy and awkward and conflicting, and so it organizes. It organizes for growth. You see this in the book of Acts. It organizes for growth. Structures get put in place. Some roles become defined. Processes are created, and that says we're going to do things this way to make it orderly. We are not going to do things that way. Eventually, took 300 years in Christianity, but buildings get built, and this is necessary. I mean, I'm not saying organization is bad. It's just a reality of the situation we're facing. Over time, this organization becomes an institution. That's an entirely different thing. And in an institution, the structures become more important than the mission itself. The processes become more important than the people. The buildings become more important than the community that's going on, because this institution is going to prioritize itself. This is something that Peter Wagner from Fuller Seminary before, he saw, and he wrote it in his book, The New Apostolic Leaders. It's an older book, but it's got this central eye-opener for me, and I thought it was very helpful. He said that let's say it goes like this. You're a fiery leader, you start a thing, and your thing grows, and you gather a crowd. You know everybody in this group, you know your leaders, and that is where everything is at its best. It's flowing out of you into your leaders and into the people, and that works fine until it grows to the next stage. And in order to grow to the next stage, you have to put another layer of management that is disconnected, that handles the processes below. And as soon as you do that, now you've created the flaw that turns your organization into, because you have to be, or even families have to be organized, but you turn your organization into an institution, and an institution demands maintenance. Now, instead of making disciples, we are managing the institution. Instead of following Jesus, we are running the machine. And instead of being the church, we are doing church. And the people who are supposed to be leading this movement are now exhausted from institutional maintenance, because very few things can drain the life out of you like that. And this is not a new problem. It has happened throughout history. Basically, when you prioritize growth and your growth takes off, you will build an infrastructure to manage that growth. And the more ambitious the infrastructure, the more weight it will later carry. And the maintenance of that infrastructure will actually pull you under. It is the seed of your undoing, because the weight of the maintenance of the system itself drags down. There's been 12 great civilizations in human history that we're aware of, and all 12 of them have crashed and burned from this exact same process. What starts as a visionary movement becomes an organization, then an institution, and then the institution builds itself out with structure. Buildings, government, budget, layers of management, and the weight of maintaining this thing starts to overwhelm everything that the vision was all about. So what happens when the people leading the church are running on empty? There's a high cost for this erosion, because when our ministry leaders are exhausted from running this machine, we lose prophetic witness, because prophets challenge the status quo, but institutions they are all about preserving status quo. The bigger they are, the more they resist change or any form of correction. We lose authentic community, because community requires being present, physically present. It requires vulnerability, and it requires the thing that institutions don't have much of, and that is free time. But when you're running and you're going meeting to meeting, managing crisis after crisis, you do not have time for deep relationships. You have transactions, not transformations. We lose our spiritual vitality because you can't give others what you don't have. And if your own soul is dry, you can't water anyone else's. And then finally, as we're discovering now, you lose the next generation. Because if they have a chance to vote, they're going to vote with their feet. They can tell when you're just going through the motions, and they can see when the institution matters more than mission. Young people are all about their mission. And today they're walking away in droves. We're losing 60% of our young people by age 30. This is catastrophic, and we have to deal with it. The worst loss of all, though, is we lose Jesus. And you say, you can't lose Jesus in the church. Well, read Revelation. This is not a new problem. Revelation chapter 1, chapter 2, this is Jesus talking to churches. And it has always been so shocking to me that, this is in the days of persecution. He's got these little churches, and they're scattered across Asia Minor. And as Jesus is looking down on them, he is he is so straight talking with all of them, one by one, he's finding, but it's all the same thing. When he gets to the end of what they're doing that's wrong, he always threatens, I'm going to leave. I'm going to remove your candle and you can do this by yourself. And sometimes people feel like that's exactly what has happened. They're in a group that Jesus is no longer with, and they are, out of love for family, out of love for denomination or sense of obligation or guilt or whatever, they are going to stay with it and keep this thing going. How do we stop all this? But Jesus always says the same thing. You have left your first love. Who's the first love? Me. Your direct connection to Jesus has failed. You have all this other stuff. He says, some of you look at what you've got, you're rich. You've got stuff and you feel so good about, significance that you've achieved. But Jesus says you're poor and blind and naked because you don't have me anymore. And that's the line that Jesus gives us that we can never forget. He says, without me, you can do nothing. Okay, so how do we stop this erosion? Geez, I don't want this happening to any more people who are serving in the body of Christ. Well, in coming episodes, because we're on a journey, we're going to explore what that looks like practically. Like, how do you rebuild this? Personally, how do you rebuild a personal, Jesus faith? We want to redo theology, mission, church, discipleship, Jesus, all of it. We want to recover the simple, life-giving way of Jesus. But first, we got to acknowledge the cost of staying where we are. If we do nothing, and that's the default. Most people are not going to change. This is not just a personal problem that some people are tired. This is a systemic problem, and it is killing the church from the inside out. So here's where we're at. This is serious talk. This is serious business. We've talked about the quiet exodus. People are leaving. We talked about the paradox that you can love Jesus and still be repelled by the institutional version of Christianity around you. Today, we talked about the slow erosion of energy, what it's like to serve in the ministry while being depleted by the institutional maintenance you're having to do. There's one more piece of pain we need to address, and that is that we are living in a time, it's always been this way, but it's really hard now, when having convictions, really believing in something and standing by it, it comes at a cost. So in our next episode, we're going to talk about the privilege and the cost of having convictions. I have convictions about what we're talking about. And I hope you do too. When you hold firm beliefs in a culture, whether it's a broader society or a church culture that demands conformity or silence, it's going to cost you something. We're going to look at why conviction is both a gift and a burden. And we'll ask the question, is conviction worth it? Because if we're going to read Jesus everything, we're going to need conviction. We're going to need people who are willing to stand firm even when it costs them something. And if you're someone who's tired of compromising and you're tired of going along with the crowd, tired of staying silent, well, this next episode is for you. Okay, here's our discussion question for the week. What part of faith has begun to feel more like maintenance than meaning? Until next time, I'm Chuck Quinley, and thanks for joining me on the Grounded podcast as we read Jesus everything. See you next time.